Welcome. It is episode 2 of the Fantasy Football Vampire Podcast. This is, like I said, the second episode. If you've not done so yet and you would like to be a part of a new way to play fantasy football, sign up to play in a Vampire League. VampireLeaguesFF@gmail.com. Email us. We are forming leagues this year on Sleeper for the 2022 season. In the near future, again, like I said in episode 1, if you have not caught that, there will be a new platform to have your fantasy leagues join and play that specializes in a new way to play fantasy football. Vampire Leagues. Well, it is hard to believe that we are in the heart of draft season. It is middle of August, and the heart of draft season is coming upon us. We are in the first biggest draft weekends of the year. Now, this is not the biggest. That happens later. But this is the first biggest one of the year. It is now time for us so we can look at ADP data. What is actually happening in your home leagues? Prior to this, if you're looking at ADP data, you better be looking at best ball league data. Best balls, those are going to where diehard fantasy analysts are drafting in July. And these are where you can see where the early fantasy drafters put their stakes into what they buy into for the year, who they're buying into. But even the best high stakes players are not always drafting until August. Most will wait till August and then look at, then if you're looking at ADP data, that can be misleading. Now, after saying all that, let's look at a few players that over the summer have either risen or fallen, done a little bit of both in ADP, and let's see why. Again, let's talk about what we're trying to do here. We are to think of ways that how do we need to evaluate players? We want to evaluate players correctly and know how to shuffle through the noise. Again, this is why we take everything into context. I can tell you in May, after the NFL draft, why I like a player or don't like a player at that point in time. And if you watch a video or read articles that was made in the summer, early summer, May, June, July, but now, time I have changing perspective on that player, does it not? This is why you should be able to say, I can like a player. But I don't want to draft that player at his cost. Why? It's a high opportunity cost to draft that player at that cost. I can still like him. I'm not paying that price, though. I will let somebody else pay that price and go draft somebody else. We cannot have tunnel vision. Love players, hate the ADP. Don't overdraft. Just because you want to say, I need this guy on my roster, don't fall into that trap. This is where you, as a player, can get hung up on what strategy do I use. If you go into a draft and you're saying, I need to draft this way, I need to use robust RB, I need to use zero RB, I need to do this or that, you can get tunnel vision. You can go to a draft and say, well, I need to get this person and read 2 or 3 rounds, ignoring the value of other positions or situations where you see a player falling. Why? Because that's not the right position. But you've built your team in a certain way to follow that strategy, and you lost out. Again, I'm not saying don't go into a draft and use a strategy, but be ready to change. Why? Because the way you mock drafted is not going to be the same way that your draft's going to go. I guarantee that. But let's look some at these ADP shakers and movers for the summer and now as we start into the beginning of draft season in August. Let's start with the player here that I don't think there's a podcaster out there. I don't think there's a fantasy analyst out there, a wannabe YouTuber like myself, that doesn't like this guy. But he is a perfect example of looking at timeline and when the player is being talked about. And if something said in May, that it may look different now in the middle of August. This player is all going to really take a look at what matters. What's the opportunity cost in taking this player? If the ADP continues to rise, is this a player still wanting to draft? Are you going to get tunnel vision and say, I need this player on my team at all costs? Are you locked into this player that you're going to get him? The player I'm talking about is Michael Pittman. I love Michael Pittman. Now, I've said that this year, Michael Pittman is going to have a great year. I've said this since March. But in the middle of August, every other fantasy analyst, like I said, is having that same conversation. Michael Pittman's going to have a good, if not great, year. This is due to the diehard sickos like myself that can't seem to shake why we're doing draft research in May, because we have nothing better to do. But let's look at his ADP in May, and I know why are we drafting in May, but let's get over that fact first. But in May, Pittman was a late round pick in the 5th round. That is a steal. If you're getting a number 1 wide receiver option on a team that it should have an ascending offense, they have an upgraded quarterback, there is very little to any competition or targets as far as who's that number 1 guy. Pittman is sealed into that position. He should have a career. There's a lot of things that points to that. But over the summer, guess what's happened? Good news coming out of camp. There's chemistry between Matt Ryan and Michael Pittman. There's chemistry between them. It's the Breakfast Club 2.0 between Pittman and Ryan, same as Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford last year. So what has happened? Michael Pittman's ADP has risen. Now he's risen 2-3 rounds, depending on where you're drafting. Now, I still think Pittman is a great value. If you're getting Pittman in the 3rd round, and let's say he's your wide receiver 2, maybe you're going bold enough and saying, I'm going to grab a couple of running backs early and turn around in the 3rd and grab Pittman as my wide receiver 1. He's a great value still. Because his range of opportunities, he has a range of opportunity to be a top 5 fantasy football wide receiver. He also could be a wide receiver 2. He could land outside the top 12. It is very possible. That is within range. I don't do stats as binary. It is not. It's going to be this, or it's going to be, or it's not. No. My predictions, my projections, are based off what's the possibility, what's the range. Have to get out of the mode of thinking of it's going to be this and only this. What's the range of that player's opportunity? What's the high, or as some people like to say, the ceiling? And what's the floor? What's the low? Okay? But if part of the range of Michael Pittman and grabbing him in the 3rd is you are getting this year's Cooper Kupp, it's pretty good value. But are you going to be the guy that says, I need to take him in the 2nd? Because I don't know if he's going to come back. And then I just lost out because an opportunity cost of a different player that fell. That could have had and would have also. And I didn't change my draft strategy. Don't get tunnel vision. Don't do it. That is not how you win fantasy football. So, while I'm not definitely going to say Michael Pittman is going to be this year's Cooper Kupp, it is possible. Next player is Deontay Johnson. In May, Johnson was a late 3rd round pick. That's actually not too bad. Most people would say, I would like to take in the 3rd. But over the summer, there's been a lot of news coming out of Steelers camp. A lot of news. Potential new quarterback. A rookie, potentially. Kenny Pickett that was drafted. High rookie needs to play. Was going to be Mitchell Trubisky, who we all know the last time we saw him, he really wasn't that great. But now Johnson has fallen. He is now a late 4th round pick to an early 5th round pick, depending on your league or depending on who you're drafting. 1 round and he has fallen. Now, this is not any sort of negative news that is about Johnson himself. Deontay Johnson has not done anything. He's not hurt. This is all about his situation. Who's the ball? What's going to happen? Juju's now gone. That's positive. That should raise his ADP, should it not? Claypool's been hurt. Again, should that not raise his ADP? George Pickens has become a star of the camp, but I think that's more of a issue for Claypool than it is for Johnson. I think those two players play different positions. Pickens actually helps Johnson, in my opinion, and he should rise. This is where a wide receiver falling, if you trust the situation, and there are others like this in this year's draft too, where you have to take each situation by situation. We can't cover all of them, and we won't. This is an example, a thought experiment for you as you're entering drafts. But we have to look and be careful about news again. This is about the news, the situation that Johnson finds himself in, not about the player himself. So you can't say, I won't draft this person. And Johnson is not the clear one that people are saying, I won't draft. There are others that are a little more clear, and this is why I chose Deontay Johnson versus others, because it's the thought experiment we have to run. Am I willing to take a player if he falls far enough? Can I construct my team to have a little bit of volatility of a potential upside because I'm willing to take the risk? Without risk, the reward is very small. Just remember that. If you're going into a draft and you say, I need to use a particular strategy, I need robust RB, I need zero RB, I need to do this. So that means in this round, I have to draft this position. You may miss value. Don't get so caught up in how you have to draft that you lose the sight of value. Last year, Brandon Cooks was not a sexy pick. And yet, if you draft, he didn't really hurt your team that much, did he? Too often, though, we forget the lessons of years past. Now, we can just look at the numbers for last year, sure. But again, as I've said before in previous shows, we have to be careful when it comes to football analytics. 17 data points is not a whole lot, okay? So we have to be careful when we're looking at those data points, and that doesn't carry year over year because the situation is also different. But all this is to say is Deontay Johnson could have value. Yeah, it's going to be a little different than what he had with Ben Roethlisberger as his quarterback. But there's still value. A wide receiver that's good will have value. We could look at this as a single game thought process, right? You say, do I want to play a quarterback for a team or a wide receiver for that team? I have options for both. Well, if you would think a wide receiver to have a good game for your team is 100 yards, maybe a touchdown, especially if it's PPR, say he has 100 yards, 6 catches, and a touchdown. In a pretty typical league for PPR, you're looking at, 18 points there? Probably, my math's not correct. But anyway, my point is, that's a good fantasy day for your wide receiver. The quarterback scoring is a little different, though. Say your quarterback throws for 200 yards and only 1 touchdown and 3 picks. It was a bad day. So you have to judge each position a little different. You can't just say, well, I'm not going to draft this team or I'm not going to draft that team, because we don't know the situation. Again, today we're just highlighting a few players. We want to get the thought process out, right? We want to have that thought process going as we're going into our draft. Right? You can go to any other podcast. I'm not going to give you who to draft. If you want a list of who to draft and when and why and all of that, find somebody else. Okay? This is about the thoughts. How are we thinking about players as we draft? How are we thinking about our drafts and going into them prepared for the variance? Okay? We have to weed through all the noise of everything to be sharp when we get into our drafts. The last guy we're going to highlight here is an ex-mate of Deontay Johnson's. He has a new team now this year. He is Juju, none other than Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, Juju's an interesting case. He has a new team, as we all know. He's now with Kansas City, not with Pittsburgh. New team, new quarterback, and new situation. There's a lot unknown in Kansas City. A lot has happened with that team. But in the middle of August, I would say he's undervalued. But that's not an uncommon take. Most people are coming around now to say, well, Juju's an undervalued pick. If you get him where he's going, you have a great pick right there. I do want to look at his ADP, though. Let's show how it's volatile throughout the summer and going into drafts. Prior to the draft, the NFL draft, that is, not fantasy drafts, or it was right after, Juju was a late 7th round pick. Okay? What happened in the draft? Kansas City selects Sky Moore. What happens to Juju's draft value? That ADP drops by 1 round. All because there's some conceived competition from a rookie. That's not done anything yet, but it doesn't matter. The news is out there. Kansas City selected Sky Moore. They want Sky Moore. Juju's only on a 1-year contract. We can't assume that. Don't assume you know what's going to happen. Over the summer, there's been more good news, more stories. Again, not quite the Breakfast Club that Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford have, but there have been a lot more good stories coming out of the connection Juju has with Patrick Mahomes than Sky Moore. Sky Moore's been hurt, and again, he's a rookie. Not as much positive news. Now, long term, don't get me wrong, this is not a hate Sky Moore take. I don't do that here. Okay? I love Sky Moore long term, but this year, I prefer having Juju on my team. If I'm drafting one, and I know Juju is the most expensive, but I like his value still. You have to look at news and what drives value. What drives the ADP? Have to look at what's important. Oh, if you've tuned in, for the one of you or however many of you that did, I hope you enjoyed today's thought process. The topics of today. Think through this. Why has a player's ADP risen or fallen? Is that important? Is what's making it rise or fall, is that really important? Or do I need to really look at something else? Am I missing something? If you're drafting this weekend, I wish you the best of luck. Remember to have fun. This is a game that we play that's played upon a game, where a ball is thrown from one person to another, and it bounces, creates variance in how we play it and what we see. And again, if you're drafting, you like to be an early adopter in fantasy gaming, join us here at Vampire Nation here. Sign up for the new leagues that are forming on Sleeper. Email vampireleaguesff@gmail.com to sign up and be entered. And until next time, remember, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. We'll see you next time.